Hi there. So today we are going to be focusing on hip and full body mobility to reduce sciatic tension, improve your pelvic alignment, and to help you feel more supported when you're standing and walking. So what you're going to need today is a chair. I have a yoga block, a mat, and we're going to go through about 8 exercises that you can do on a daily basis to help relieve sciatic pain, help align your pelvis, and just help you feel better in your day-to-day movements. So what we're going to do first is we are going to do a supported breathing technique that's going to help to unload that lower back, so your lumbar spine, and inhibit those hip flexors, because sometimes those can play a really big role in pelvic tilt. And we're also going to kind of try to lessen a little bit of that sciatic flare up, if you will. So what I'm going to have you do is you're going to lay on the floor on your back to start out with. And we're going to use the chair to place our legs on. So I'm going to kind of scoot myself forward so that my calves are on the seat of the chair, and my legs are in this like 90-90 position here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about tucking my tailbone under just slightly. So this is going to engage my core. And I'm going to do some nice breathing here. So I'm going to think about breathing in through my nose and breathing out through my mouth. In through my nose and out through my mouth. So I'm trying to keep my lower back connected with the mat. So notice how I have a little bit of a pelvic tilt here. And that's going to help unload that lumbar spine a little bit. So what I don't want to do is have this tilt in my back so that there's a space underneath my low back in the mat. I want to keep that tucked nice and flat there. So this lower ab area is going to be nice and engaged. So you're going to do this for about 60 seconds to 2 minutes. So you can spend as much time here as you want to kind of get your body in a position to be able to go forward with the rest of the exercises. If you're having some sciatic flare up, this can help just really decompress that area before we do some of the other exercises. So once you've done your 1 to 2 minutes of this 90-90 breathing, then what we're going to do is we are going to gently come out of this position. So kind of roll to your side and get yourself up. So there's 2 different ways that you can do this next one. So we are going to do a hip flexor stretch. So the first way you could do it is supported standing. So I'm going to have a chair to hang on to. You could use a counter if you don't have a chair. And I'm going to place my hands on the back of the chair, and then I'm just going to step back into this split stance position. So I have my left leg forward, my right leg is back. I'm going to bend both my knees, and as I do that, I'm going to tuck my tailbone under. And then I'm just going to squeeze the glute of the back leg, which happens to be my right leg in this position, and get a nice opening through my hip flexor here. So this would be the standing version of a hip flexor stretch. You're going to want to hold this for about 60 seconds. So just a gentle squeeze in that glute, tailbone is slightly tilted, and then knees are bent, body's up nice and straight, and you're hanging onto that chair for support. So then of course you would switch sides, set that all up the same way, double bent knee, tucked pelvis, squeezing that back glute gently to get a nice opening in the front of that back hip. So that is your standing version. If that doesn't feel like it gives you quite enough of a stretch through the front of those hip flexors, you can take this to a down on the floor mat version. So what that one's going to look like is, and sometimes it's nice to have a yoga block to kind of steady yourself here for a little bit of support in this low hip flexor lunge position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring one leg forward. So I'm going to have, in this case, I have my left leg forward. I'm going to have a yoga block here to hang on to for support if I need it. And then I'm just going to let my hips sink forward. So notice how the heel of my front foot is on the floor. So you don't want this foot popped back so that the heel comes up. You're just not gonna get the stretch that you want here. So walk that front foot forward enough so that you can really let those hips kind of sink forward. You can use your thigh for support. You can use a yoga block for support. You could even have a chair in front of you here for support. So this is a little bit more intense for that hip flexor stretch. So definitely start with the standing version and then work your way down to this version if it feels appropriate for you. And then of course, we're going to just gently tilt that tailbone and squeeze this back glute for a little bit more opening in the front of this back leg, which happens to be my right leg in this position. So again, you want to hold this for about 60 seconds, and then you would just gently come out of this and switch sides. So again, thinking about having that front foot up, walked it forward enough that the heel stays down, letting those hips nice and sink forward. Once that feels like it's loosening a little bit, then you can tilt that tailbone just slightly and squeeze this back glute gently to get more of an opening in the back front of the hip flexor area. So 60 seconds on this side. So that is our second exercise. The next one we're gonna do is, a lot of times when we have sciatic issues, we can have hip hiking. So hip hiking is when one hip is a little bit higher than the other. So what this tells me is that there's some tightness through the hips that's causing one hip to come up a little higher. QL might be a little bit tight. And so what we want to do is we want to try to get this pelvis back to a neutral position, and to get this QL to stop working so hard to compensate for some muscle imbalances here. So you will need your chair for some support again. So you want to start with the leg that has the hip hike. So you may not be aware of which side is your hip hike. You can always take a look in a mirror. So what you would do is you would find those two hip points and stand and look at a mirror, sometimes putting a little sticker on each of those hip points. And then that way you could see if you have one hip that's higher than the other. My left hip tends to be a little bit higher than my right, but everybody is different. So at any rate, you are going to have your foot, the foot that you have the hike on, so whichever side that is. So for me, I'm going to use my right leg here. You're going to stand that foot on a yoga block. So you've got your chair. So I'm standing on this yoga block with my right foot, and my left foot is just kind of hanging out in space here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just let my hips, my pelvis, so I'm not trying to push my hip out. Okay, so I'm trying to just drop my pelvis just slightly. It's a very small movement, and then bring it back up to neutral. Drop it just slightly, bring it up to neutral. So I'm not pushing that hip out to try to get myself to touch the floor. What I'm trying to do is really think about my pelvis and how I want to try to straighten that out and get a little movement here and try to get this QL to chill out and not do all the work. So I'm just going to let the foot drop just slightly and then pull up. So now when I'm trying to bring my left leg back to neutral, notice how this is like a super, super small movement, right? I'm trying to use this outer glute med, so the outside of my glute muscle here, to activate, to pull that hip up. So I'm not trying to overcompensate and hike it up really high. I'm just trying to get a little subtle shift in that hip. So hopefully you can see that there. So you're going to want to do, very slow motion, maybe 10 or so, and then take a rest, come right off the block, and then possibly do another set of 10. So really slow movement here. Again, not thinking about pushing the hip out, thinking about the pelvis alignment, dropping it down, and then just bringing it back to neutral. So 10 of those really small movements. You may feel that standing glute on the right side there while you do that, firing up for you there. So you want to focus on doing that just on the side where you have the hip hike. So again, the side that the hip hike is the side that's up on the yoga block. All right, so our next one is called a seated sciatic nerve glide. So this is going to try to loosen up that sciatic nerve a little bit and kind of get it to calm down. So I'm gonna have a seat in a chair. I'm gonna sit myself forward, and then I'm gonna have my core nice and engaged. So I'm sitting up nice and tall. Slowly, I'm going to extend my leg. I'm gonna place my heel on the floor in front of me. So I'm just gonna turn sideways here so you can see a little bit more clearly. So I'm going to extend my leg. When I point my toes towards the ceiling, I'm going to bring my chin up to the ceiling. And then I'm gonna hold that for about 10 seconds. And then I'm going to point my toes and drop my chin and hold that for 10 seconds. I'm gonna point my toes towards the ceiling, lift my chin, hold for 10 seconds, and drop my chin, point the toes for 10 seconds. And you could do about 3 rounds of that, again, on the affected side, whether, whichever side you have sciatic pain is the side that you want to work on that sciatic nerve glide. So you want to do probably about 3 rounds of that. So the next one we're going to do is going to be a basic bridge. So I'm going to come down to the mat. I'm going to lay on my back. Hands are going to be on either side of my body. My back is going to be flat on the mat and my feet are flat on the mat with my knees bent. So what I want to do is I want to tuck my tailbone. So again, I'm trying to think about pressing my lower back into the mat before I push through those heels to come up into bridge. So when I come up into bridge, I really want to feel this in the back of my legs and not necessarily in the front. So I'm trying to activate these hamstrings. So tilt that tailbone coming up. It does not have to be a huge high bridge. I'm not looking for a back arch here. I'm looking more for a stable pelvis. So lifting the knee, lifting the butt, tilting that tailbone. Notice how I'm not super high up off the ground, but I'm feeling a lot of hamstring here, which is what I want you to feel. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach my arms up towards the ceiling, holding all of this position here. So I'm holding that pelvic tilt under, back is nice and flat, pretending like I'm still on the mat and my back is still touching the mat. My arms are straight up over my chest. I'm really feeling those hamstrings and glutes, and then I'm gonna release that all back down to the mat. I'm gonna go for 10 of these. So I'm going to tilt that tailbone, reach those hands up, and then come down. So we're gonna do 2 rounds of 10. So nice and slow and controlled here, really, really focusing on the form and where we feel this. So again, you really wanna feel glutes and hamstrings here. Beautiful. So you'll do 10 of those times 2 sets. Our next exercise is going to be a clamshell. So we're gonna be on our side. I'm gonna be propped up on my elbow. If it's more comfortable for you to be down here like this, that's totally fine too. Just find a spot that's nice and comfortable for you. If you're up on the elbow is directly underneath that shoulder. So I have my legs in this 45-degree bent, hooked, side lying position. But what I really want to focus on here is I want to have these hips nice and stacked. So try not to be rolling back or rolling forward. Sometimes this can be uncomfortable on the hip bone. If that's the case for you, you can always grab a pillow or a towel to place it underneath this hip bone so that it's not uncomfortable for you to be on your side like this. But the important thing here is I'm thinking about stacking these hips, so not rolling forward, not rolling back. Insides of my feet are together. Now the other key to this exercise here is I really want to make sure that I have a tucked pelvis. So I don't want to have an arch in this low back. So I want to actively think about tucking that pelvis under. This is going to automatically tighten up these lower abs. I want to hold this position throughout the whole clamshell. So hands can be in front for a little stability as long as it doesn't cause you to roll forward. Or you can place that hand on the hip, which is also a nice reminder to keep those hips nice and stacked. So I've got this pelvic tilt that I'm holding. This is a little bit of work to hold this pelvic tilt. My hips are nice and stacked. I'm going to open and close that top leg, but I'm not going to roll my hip open as I do this, okay? So it's a much smaller movement than you might imagine. So tuck that pelvis, belly's pulling up and in, and I'm just going to open and close that top leg with this very small movement. So notice how my body is not moving at all. The only thing that's moving is that top leg. So you're gonna go for 10 of these and then take a rest, and then you'll do 10 more, and then you can switch sides and set that whole thing up on the other side. So elbows right up underneath, hand is on the hip, legs are in 45, hips are nice and stacked. Then I'm going to tuck that tailbone, and then I'm going to add 10 of these and 2 sets of these. The next one we're going to do is we are going to come back up to stand, and we are going to use our chair support again. So I'm going to have my chair. I'm going to stand with my hands on the back of the chair again, and I'm going to step back into just a little bit of a split stance. So nice and narrow here, narrow split stance. So I'm not like way back like this. So my legs are just a little bit offset. My feet are flat on the floor. I'm going to tuck my tailbone. So again, notice how this is a theme here. Sometimes when we have an anterior tilt and that back arches like this, it can cause some compression and can also cause some sciatic pain. So we want to make sure that we've got this nice and tucked, engages that core in the front, pelvic tilt, hands on the chair. I'm going to shift my weight into the front leg. My back leg stays on the floor, heel stays on the floor, but I'm shifting my weight forward. And then I'm going to do the same thing and shift my weight back. So when I shift my weight forward, I have probably about 75 to 80% of my weight on the front leg. And then when I shift my weight back, I'm shooting for 75 to 80% weight on that back leg. But what I really want to focus on here is keeping that pelvic tilt this whole time. So trying to keep that pelvis in a neutral position as I shift forward and back. And then of course we're going to switch sides. Same thing, set it up, tuck that tailbone, forward and back. Nice and slow. So you probably want to do about 10 of these on each side. So our final mobility move for today's workout is going to be a side lying thoracic opener. So I'm going to be on my side. I'm actually going to let myself come all the way down here onto my side. I've got myself in this 45-degree hook lying position again, and my hips are stacked just like they were for our clamshell. I'm going to tuck my tailbone again. This time I'm going to bring my hands together in front of me, and then I'm going to open like a book and close like a book. But again, my focus here is keeping that neutral spine, which means a slight tuck of that tailbone. So keeping that pelvis tucked under as I open and close this book. And you're gonna go for about 10 to 15 of these on each side. So then of course you would switch your sides. Set it up, take the time, stack the hips, tuck the tailbone, and then open and close for 10 or 15 on this side.
So these are all really great exercises to do daily to help improve your pelvic alignment. So if you have an anterior tilt, this is really great to kind of realign your pelvis and realign your brain to keep that pelvis in a nice neutral position. It's also going to help reduce sciatic tension and just overall help you feel better in your day-to-day. All right.